Raga stood upon the crest of the hill, leaning on his spear staff, and looked out across the savannah. The rolling grasslands stretched for kilometers in every direction, a yellow sea swaying gently in the wind, broken only by the occasional tree or rocky outcrop. On the horizon, he could make out the darker green of the jungle canopy. The tribesman took out a red colored root from an animal skin pouch around his neck and began to chew it. As he crushed the root between his teeth, he felt its juices spreading their effects against his body, loosening the ties between mortal flesh and spirit. His limbs began to go numb, and he felt his mind ready itself for the journey to the world of the gods. He looked vaguely up at the yellow sky, his gaze attracted by movement. From out of the heavens dropped a star, rapidly falling across and towards Agara, straight as an arrow towards the ridge. This was an omen, but Agara was not sure if it was good or ill. For almost 100 heartbeats, the tribesmen watched the object grow larger and larger until it impacted into the ground at the base of the hill in a shower of mud and dust. It looked like a gigantic egg, made out of thick, leathery skin and ribbed bone plates. As Agara watched, the egg cracked open, its upper half peeling apart like a grotesque flower. There was a spray of purplish ichor, and a large, gangling shape flopped from the star egg into the ground. The shape stretched itself to its full height, the fluids of its cocoon dripping from its body. It was twice Agara's height, and it stood on two thick legs that unfolded from four upper limbs. Two of them wicked-looking claws, over a man's height and length. Its purplish flesh was protected by overlapping chitinous plates, and powerful muscle and sinew ripped under its dark skin. Agara's heart began beating faster and faster until he could feel cold sweat prickling all over his body, making him shiver uncontrollably as the creature looked around, seeming to sniff the air. With a sudden snap of its monstrous insect head, the beast fixed its hellish glare on Agara, snaring him, and the gaze of its red eyes. With a pace startling for its size, the star beast bounded up the slope, its forelimbs ripping at the earth to increase speed. Agara found himself transfixed, unable to move or shout. He realized this must be one of the creatures from beyond the void, which the newcomers had warned his people about. A predator from beyond the distant stars, which had come for his soul. As the monster sped towards him, Agara felt something nagging at the back of his mind and realized he could hear a murmur from off to his right. He wanted to look, but could not tear his eyes away from the demon of destruction racing towards him. The creature was only a great few strides away from Agara, its claws arcing back to deliver the killing attack. Without warning, a lightning storm of light lashed into the void demon, blasting it sprawling to the ground, its limbs flailing wildly. Snapping out of the beast's hypnotic spell, Agara spanned to see the metal creatures advancing across the ridge, spitting fire at the monstrous intruder. The lucky spirits arrived to save him. The native just keeps on staring dumbly as we open fire again. I guess it ain't that surprising, considering that these guys, a simple mono-edged knife, is considered a creation of the gods. Dumb locals. If they weren't so stupid, they'd be able to fend for themselves, and we wouldn't be here risking our necks to protect them. My attention's distracted away from him when the lictor gets to its feet, and the chimeras have to fire another volley into the creature. I order the rest of the platoon to take up firing positions, keeping up a steady stream of lasbolts as we advance. The lictor then leaps at Franks' squad, but even as it races towards them, hissing like some damned Avarian cobra, they tear it apart with their lasguns and heavy bolter. It kind of collapses in on itself, those huge killing claws folding over its belly. I walk up to make sure it's truly dead. You can never tell with these fragging tyrannids. Some of them have got powers of regeneration you just wouldn't believe. Its dark blood had spattered all over the thin grass, and it certainly looks like a corpse. To make sure, I level my pistol at its face and fire 6 shots. Okay, last chancers, I called to my platoon. Mount up, move out. Some of them began to walk back to the Chimera transports, but Franks, Letts, and some others walk over to where I'm standing. It's Letts who speaks first. We've been thinking, Kage. We got the perfect opportunity here. I mean, we got a great chance to get the hell out of this fragging outfit once and for all. I look at them, not knowing what they mean. What have you got in mind? Well, Frank says, it's 2 leagues to the jungles. But the colonel will never find us there, and there's plenty of food to forage, shelter, everything we need to survive. Just have to turn the Chimera south, and we're free men again. His eyes were intense now, beneath his curls of hair, and he takes another step forward. Think of it, he continues. No more last chancers. No more fragging suicide missions for the colonel. No more spending every minute wondering what kind of thousands of hell we're going to end up in. Free men, Lieutenant, free men. I can hardly believe it. I've been fighting with Franks for a year, and Letts has been with the 13th Penal Legion for about twice as long. Like me, like all last chancers, they were thrown out of their regular units for breaking the Imperial Guard's rules in a big way to serve the rest of their lives in a penal legion. We've walked across a dozen battlefields together, and the worst fighting you can imagine. We've been through them all: suicide assaults, rearguard actions, and any other no hope situation you can think of. It takes more than guts and brawn to survive that long, and I can't believe they're being so stupid now. What kind of fragging scheme is that? I snapped. Their jaws drop. Frank starts getting angry, and I can see the blood rushing to his face. He's going to start trouble if I don't do something now. Look, boys, I say, trying to calm them down. You haven't thought this through, really. There's a Tyranid hive ship up there, full of specially evolved killing machines, all hungering to eat you up as soon as look at you. The only reason the sky isn't full of mycetic spores yet is because we managed to pick off the lictors before they found deliverance. So they ain't sure where to commit their forces. But it's just a stalling action. Because we can't get them all, no way. And even if we could, as soon as they find out there's more Imperial transports on the way, they'll send every bioengineered little fragger they've got onto the planet. So the way I see it, you've got 2 choices. There's your plan, which means hanging out in the open. I know it's jungle, but they'll still find you when they come down. And with that kind of chance, are you going to get out alive? Or are you going to come back with me to Deliverance, where the Battle Sisters and 2,000 natives can help us to fight? Your choice, but if you ain't going my way, I'm going to have to insist you go on foot. The Colonel would skin me alive if I let you take the Chimeras. It's only midday, so you've got 8 hours walk until sundown. Plenty of time for you to hole up and wait for the damn Tyranids to come. I see realization dawning on their faces, like the sun breaking out from behind a cloud. I thought I'd taught them better than this. But it just goes to show that some people never learn anything unless they get taught the hard way. Unfortunately, when you're in the last chancers, most people who learn the hard way are food for the worms. They don't say anything. They just turn around and start walking back to the Chimeras. I take one last look at the lictor, just to be safe. It's strange, because any other kind of cadaver would be crawling with flesh ants on this damn planet by now. There'd be a flock of carrion birds encircling overhead, but there's nothing. Not even the bugs will touch a Tyranid. Frag, all the things in this galaxy, those frackers make my skin crawl the most. The Tyranids are all bioorganisms designed to fight or do other things, fight or eat. I don't imagine that they would be edible for anything, really. They're not really alive, not in the sense that we would consider life alive, because they don't think for themselves, except for a select few. Kage and his friends, they are part of a penal colony or a penal regiment, and basically they are forced to fight. I mean, everyone has to fight, but they are forced to fight in the worst conditions. Where is my lighter? There is my lighter. So we finished the fire sweep, and I'm back in Deliverance, debriefing with the colonel in the central keep. I see the rest of the mission station out of the window. The mid-afternoon sun blazing down fiercely. It's not big, little more than a large village, really, half a mile across, with a large central compound, some scattered buildings, and of course, this keep, which doubles as an ecclesiarchy shrine. I see the men walking sentry on the curtain wall, and even at this distance, I reckon I can feel their tension. Kage! Colonel Schaefer barks, and I snap back from the outside world. There's him, me, and the two other lieutenants, Green and Cronin. As I was saying, the colonel continues pointedly, we've had a contact with a relief force. They are no more than 2 days away. If we can hold for just 48 hours, there will be 2 whole regiments of Imperial Guard. The wall should be fairly straightforward to defend. It is 18 feet high, so we just have to worry about their Hormagaunts and Lictors leaping straight up it. The others we can pick off as they climb up the walls. That leaves only the gate, but that is flanked by 2 towers with emplaced autocannons. And we can park a Chimera behind the gates themselves to make it harder to force. Any questions? Cronin clears his throat nervously and wipes a hand through his thin hair plastered across his scalp. He's a skinny man, kind of jittery in my experience. Emperor alone knows how he had the guts to have his squad incinerate an Imperial temple after stealing the artifacts inside. Even more of a surprise is that the ecclesiarchy didn't demand his head on a pole and his entrails decorating the roadway. Well, what about gargoyles, sir? No problem, the colonel assures us. He's cold as ice as usual, as calm as if we weren't going to be fighting for our damned lives in a few days, perhaps even in the next few hours. As always, he's wearing his full dress uniform, clean shaven, like he was fresh out of the barracks. He's a big man physically, I mean, but there's more to him than that. Those cold blue eyes, with his own force of will, can make him seem twice as tall as anyone around. I wouldn't call it charisma, because he's an uncommunicative and surly man. He just has this sheer presence that fills the room. We have 2 Hydras, and this keep has 4 points to defense turrets. If anything tries to flying over the walls, we have the firepower to gun them down. In any case, Kage and his platoon are acting as a mobile reserve behind the walls. If the Tyranids get a breakthrough at the walls or gates, or we have some unexpected visitors dropping down, he'll move in to bolster the defense. Anything else? I glance out of the window again to see the sunlight glittering off highly polished armor, which makes me think of something. The sisters. What's the deal here? I asked, already knowing the answer. The Adeptus Sororitas are under ministerial authority, so we have no direct control over their actions. I've spoken to the sister superior in charge and outlined our plan. I'm sure they will play their part. The same applies to the levies. They will be manning the walls, and we will concentrate our guns around the gatehouse. That is where the fighting will be the fiercest. If you need to see me, that's where you'll find me. No surprise there. The colonel is always in the roughest of the fighting, and he always walks out too. Emperor alone knows what makes him do it. We're here because we did nothing wrong and got caught. Because we did wrong and got caught. But him? What did he do wrong? I mean, what kind of man would choose to lead an Imperial Guard penal legion? What kind of mind do you need to walk away into so many situations where you must be blessed by the Emperor to ever take another breath again, and then march straight out and into the next one? You must be mad. I mean, seriously insane. They say he spends his time on board ship practicing ways to kill himself in the event he's wounded. I take it back about the Tyranids. There are some things which are a hell of a lot more scary because they're in human form, and that's what they say he is, a devil in human form. And when he's ready for a fight like now, and you look into his eyes like I'm doing, you can believe it. It's about noon, the day after the Tyranids have found us. Maybe a lictor slipped through the net, which wouldn't be surprising considering that for a big brute, they can be really sneaky. They can sniff you out 10 miles downwind. And they're covered in scales which shift color so that you can't see them. Or maybe then they just got fed up with waiting and decided to come get us, wherever we are. I stood on the wall last night and watched the spores dropping down. Scary sight, believe me. It was like 10 meteor storms all at once. These falling stars coming down, wave after wave of them. There's an old saying that if you see a shooting star, you can offer a prayer to the Emperor and he'll grant it. Well, with all those things, those flaming stars, that's one hell of a lot of prayers to be delivered on, but I decided to use them all in one go for one big, huge prayer to the Emperor. Do what you know I prayed for. Do you want to know what I prayed for? I prayed that those shooting stars would stop coming down, but they didn't. So I guess a murderer like me hasn't got the right to pray to the Emperor anymore, which is why I'm fighting now, serving him in the only way I know. Frag. Being here in this missionary station with all these ecclesiarchy types, it must be having an effect on me. I mean, I know the Emperor is our Lord and is watching over us, but I've always figured that those of us who can have to watch out for ourselves. Because he's out there to watch out for those who can't watch out for themselves. Just like we're here to defend the tribes people from the Tyranids. Because all they've got are crappy knives and spears and brave warrior hearts, which is all well and good if you're fighting amongst yourselves. But against the Tyranids, it's going to be about as effective as trying to stop a saber shell from blowing you away by holding up your hands. But I guess when you've stood there for an hour and watched your doom come out of the stars in a constant flow, it'd be nice to know if this is the time when it goes wrong and you end up with your guts torn out by a lictor's flesh hooks, or some hormigaunt stabs those dagger talons through your chest. It ain't really the end. That there's someone waiting for you, and it wasn't all really a waste of time. I know I've got to ditch these morbid thoughts, gotta stay sharp, otherwise, this is gonna be my final trip with the last Chancers. It's hard though, because I was there on Icar 4. When the last when I saw what they do on a world, how they fight, there were 6,000 last chancers back then. Less than 500 of us made it out. The regular troops, I hear, lost over 1,000,000 men defending Icar 4. There were Titans there, and Space Marines too, if the rumors are true. And even those Eldar showed up. I heard someone say once, all those guns, all those men, and we only just won the fight. I've seen so much blood and guts spilled in my life, I don't have nightmares anymore. But if there's one thing that would give me nightmares, it's Tyranids. They're just so different to us. Even orcs fight for territory and conquest, but the Tyranids, they just consume everything. Like, they're here to wipe out every single living thing in the entire galaxy, and they'll never ever stop until that's done. Which is why I stood up on the wall last night in the freezing wind. You'd never guess that it would be so hot in the day and so cold at night, watching them come down, watching my doom come. Because I've got a seriously bad feeling about this one. The hairs on my neck prickle constantly, and I feel like I'm dead already. It's just my body that's got to catch up with the plan. This is why I'm standing there, hoping there really is an emperor, that he listens to our prayers and comes to our aid. But I can't count on that, which is why I'm here now, and the sun starts dipping towards the jungles, ready to fight like I've never had to fight before, ready to do anything I can, because death is stalking across those plains right now. The main assault wave has hit the walls. The sun's low on the horizon, and they attack from that direction to blind us. The colonel was right about the gargoyles, and our air defenses were more than a match. About 100 of them came flying in, diving down to the fort. The guns opened up, blowing them out of the sky. Some managed to get over the walls, and then the Hydra guns got them, firing high explosive shells into the broods, blasting them apart. That was horrible. Pieces of bloodied and charred meat dropping down on you like obscene hailstones. No time to clean out that mess, though, because the rest of the swarm had just arrived. It's hard to tell what's going on from back where we were in reserve, a couple of 100 paces from the wall. We've cleared ourselves a killing zone, demolishing the buildings inside their perimeter, and using them to make a readout among the keep, so that if the Tyranids get inside, we've got a good second firing line. Most of the action seems to be going off around the gatehouse, just like the colonel said it would. The men there are 3 ranks deep on the walls. On the south side, while the Battle Sisters are holding the west wall. There's about half as many of the Seratas as there are last chancers, but they seem to be holding out better than we are. Then again, give me a bolt gun and power armor, and I'd show you just how mean and nasty a last chancer got. It's about a quarter of an hour since the attack began, when the Tyranids get their first breakthrough. I'm watching the eastern end of the south wall when I see a horde of running, termagants running around, and I realize there's nobody else at that end anymore. Okay, last chancers, time to die, I bellow as usual, and then we're running across the killing ground towards the wall, fast as we can. The gunners and the chimeras take the hint, and suddenly there's a fusillade of heavy bolter fire and multi-laser shots directed at the Gants. 30 heart-pounding seconds later, and we're leaping up the steps, snapping off shots with our lasguns as we close in. The supporting fire from the chimeras stops as we reach the top, and suddenly I'm surrounded by the creatures. I see one of them leveling its living gun at me, and just manage to take it down before it can fire. All of a sudden, they charge at us, and I rip my chainsword from my belt and get the blades whirring, while the others make ready with their bayonets. The termagants are biting and clawing at everything in their path, and I'd swear they were mindless if it weren't for the coordinated fashion of their attack. They swept around me, and I feel like I'm going to be washed away by the wave. The panic hits me, bile rising out of my stomach, as I see those fanged, nightmarish faces all around me. One of the termagants leaps at me, its four upper limbs drawn back, ready to attack. But I bring the chainsword around, and the blades crash through its carapace, sending thick alien blood splattering across my face. It tastes foul, and I am almost sick with the stench of it. I put a shot through the bulbous head of another one, and then something hits me hard in the back. The thing latched onto me, and I can't get at it. I feel its claws scrambling at my flat jacket, hear the material tearing away, and its hot breath on my neck, a long pointed tongue slithering over my neck. Its jaws latch onto my shoulder, and I try to angle my pistol around for a shot, desperately trying to rip this beast off me, because I don't want to be killed by some damn termagant. I'm not going to go like this, not like this. But before it gets the killing blow in, Truco is there, one of Frank's squad, his bayonet skewering the termagant, and I feel it let go and drop to the floor. There's no time to thank him. As he gets thrown to the ground, half his face ripped off by a vicious claw. The creature is hunched over him, all six limbs on the ground, ready to spring. Its red eyes turn to look upon me. I shoot its legs from beneath it and drive the chainsword into its soft, unprotected guts. Truco's screaming, wailing his head off, but there's no time to give him peace. No rest for the wicked, as they say. We push them back, inch by bloody inch, to the edge of the wall. I see Franks pick up one of them and hurl it bodily over the parapet, its limbs and tail still flailing, even as it plummets down. I look over the edge of the wall, and I see how they manage to get up. A pile of bodies stretches 2/3 of the way up the wall, almost 3 meters high. Body upon bloody body, creating a ramp of corpses for the others to run up. Grenades! Blow those bodies away from the wall, I shout, even as I dodge aside to avoid a barbed tail lashing towards my throat. My chainsword bites again, making an ear-piercing screech as it shrieks through chitinous plates. The others heard me, and they're tossing frag grenades over the parapet, trying to dislodge the fleshy pile. I see Marshall standing on top of the wall, gripping his las rifle by the barrel and swinging it from side to side like a club, battering away at the brood as it scuttles up the wall towards us. The grenades blossom, sending bits of torn flesh flying, and something gives. The pile of bodies slides outwards along the walls, falling to the ground, leaving smears of blood along the rockcrete. The termagants are falling back, away from the wall. But things aren't over yet. There's something else coming towards us, coming at us real fast. With long flea-like leaps and bounds, the Hormagaunts speed in, almost flying over the litter of corpses leading up to the wall. We're trying to shoot as many of them as possible as they close in, but there's still 20, maybe 30 of them, and they try to get to the base of the wall. They stop there for half a heartbeat, bunching those powerful leg muscles, and then they spring up, clearing the wall by a good 2 or 3 feet, those four deadly talons jabbing out. One of them punches its claws into Marshall's shoulder, and he grabs it in his arm with one hand, holding it close. He wraps his other arm around the throat of another as it pushes past, and throws himself off the wall, taking them both with him. A serrated claw sweeps up towards my groin, but I manage to get there with a chainsword, lopping off the limb, my las pistol scoring a hit in one of its glassy red eyes. The rest of the fight just blurs back into a waking nightmare of hacking flesh and slashing and stabbing, kicking and shooting, punching and screaming, bestial faces in hot breath, flashing talons, ripping claws, blood and filth and guts slick across the walkway. A constant fight until your arms are laden with fatigue and your brain can't process the information anymore. You're just fighting from instinct and nothing else. Gav Thorpe is a pretty not good author. I don't like him that much. This is the only book. This is the only book I care for him very much, and I don't even know if it's well, okay. I'm gonna give him kudos here because he breaks everything up into these nice like sections, and those sections it gives me a break for the transition to the next scene. Because if the scene takes too long, I am at risk of sounding monotonous, and if I'm monotonous, What's the point of listening to me? I wouldn't listen to me if I was monotonous. Mm. Grinding with the grinder. Grinding with the grinder. Whoa, 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 whoa. Grinding with the grinder. This book is The Last Chancers. It's science fiction. It's about a man who is basically, well, he is basically irredeemable, but all men are ultimately redeemable. If it weren't for that, then he wouldn't be redeemable. But for the fact that all men are, that is why he is. But he is the scum of the earth. I don't remember what his crimes are exactly. Oh, yeah, he's a murderer. He's a murderer. He's a murderer, and his punishment is he has to fight. But the good news is he likes fighting. And the better news is he's good at killing. So for all the sins, or for all the crimes, Lieutenant Kage, for all the ways he could pay for his crime, I don't think this is the worst thing to happen to him. We managed to stave off the assault, and as the Tyranids fall back across, a cheer starts up by the gatehouse and spreads along the wall. I let my men cheer along as well, though we've got little to celebrate. The shock of the close call with the termagant is beginning to creep up to me, and I look around for something to keep my mind occupied, not thinking about how close I came to going down this time. I see the colonel striding across the walkway towards me. His face as grim as I've ever seen. I've never seen him break into a smile, not once, though. Kage, clear away the dead. I'm sending flamer teams to clear the front of the wall. Then he's gone again, issuing orders, getting the wounded divided into those that can fight and those that need to be given the Emperor's grace. That's it. No thanks. No well done, Kage. You held the wall. Just more orders, more work, more fighting, more dying to be done. I detail some of my men to start throwing the bodies over the parapet, and then see the flamer teams are already at work. Jets of fire turning the piles into pyres. I leave them to their dirty work and seek out the colonel. I find him inside the keep, talking to Nathaniel, the missionary in charge of the station. They seem to be arguing about something. But these men, they need treating. You cannot make them fight again? Nathaniel's complaining. If these men cannot fight, they are dead, missionary. We need every single man we have for the walls, the colonel replies in that low, grating voice of his. It's the first time I've had a chance to get a proper look at him. It's the first time I've had a chance to get a proper look at him since the fight began. His uniform is soaked in blood, alien and human, but none of it appears to be his. There's not a scratch on his skin, not a fragging scratch. My spine goes to ice, and I try not to think about it. Nathaniel's still arguing, but the colonel holds up his head to stop him. These men do not deserve your pity, he says, his eyes flashing out like sun on ice. They are thieves, murderers, looters, rapists, insubordinates, and heretics. Every single sin you can conceive of has been committed, at least by one man here. More than that, they are traitors. They once served as freemen in the great imperial army. but they betrayed the trust placed in them by the emperor and his servants. They have broken the prescriptions of imperial law and have profaned the emperor's benevolence with their selfishness, and I must punish them for it. Only the emperor can judge our sins, argues Nathaniel, and only in death can we receive the emperor's judgment. The colonel completes his catechism. Nathaniel takes a long look at him, then turns away. Remember, Nathaniel, the colonel calls after him, serve the emperor today, for tomorrow you may be dead. And then, just for an instant, a tiny fraction of a second, there's the ghost of a smile on Colonel Schaefer's lips, a minuscule hint of satisfaction, like he knows something the rest of the galaxy doesn't. Kage, he calls, like he must have sensed I was there, beckoning me over with a finger. As I am sure you know, that was just the first assault. I do not know when the next one will come, so stay ready. It is only an hour until the sun goes down, so I think they will wait until nightfall. I want you and your platoon to stay near the gate. This first attack was just to test our defenses, to count our guns. They know where we were most hard pressed around the gate, so they'll throw the bulk of their forces there next time. We must hold the gate at all costs, Kage. Otherwise, it's over. Stay close to the gate, but wait for my signal. Do not, at any cost, allow yourself to get drawn away from the gate. Is that clear? Perfectly, sir, I reply, as if I couldn't see the scenario for myself. This time, we just faced gargoyles, termagants, and hormagaunts. They're all expendable troops. Next time, it'll be much worse. They'll come in with the warriors, the carnifexes, and even maybe the big bug himself, the hive tyrant. You have your orders, Lieutenant. Snap to it. I want clear fire for everyone in half an hour. Then he's off again, shouting for Green and Cronin. It's only like 85 pounds on each arm, something like that. It's not that much. The colonel was right. I knew he would be. Emperor taken, but he's always so damned right. Nathaniel comes sharply. Nightfall comes sharply. The Tyrannid's waiting for us. I help Cronin's platoon rig up some searchlights, scavenge from the chimeras, and get them set up on the wall. The constant hum of portable generators fills the air, but listening won't do us any good, because those Tyrannids can move as silent as you like when they want to. That's one of the scariest things about them. The silence. No battle cries, no war chants, just waves of them, sweeping on towards you. When they're fighting, they hiss a lot, but I doubt if they got any real language to speak of. They're just animals, bugs, but they're well organized for all that. They're like the wasps I saw on treaties, who seem to know what each other were up to. When one of them found you, the rest would soon come buzzing in, just like the lictors finding the prey for the rest of the swarm. So I'm up on the wall, checking everything is okay, when the searchlights blaze on at last. The stupid grunts start angling them far away from the wall, like they want to get the earliest warning possible, which I can understand. Problem is, the light doesn't hit the ground before it's too weak to show anything. I grab the nearest one and point it further down, about 70 meters out. I catch a glimmer of movement and shout for the others to train to that point. What I see makes my spine tingle with fear, a sensation, I might add, that I'm not all too familiar with, though far too familiar for my own liking. There's a big brood of termagants out there, crawling through the grass on their bellies, sneaking really close. Behind them are crouched the warriors, big beasts, twice as tall as a man. Their four upper limbs evolved into a variety of deadly ranged and close combat weapons. They're creeping forward. Bony joints and chitinous plates show up in the white glare of the searchlights. The light glitters off their eyes, countless shining orbs reflected back at me. Those eyes seem dead. There's no emotion, nothing, not even a touch of hunger, which is what you would expect considering that this race devours whole planets. No, the only eyes I've ever seen colder were the white fire stares of Colonel Schaefer's, and we all know he's not really human. Mark your targets, open fire, I bellowed. I see them opening up, first with the missile launchers and autocannons, and then with volleys of las fire, as the Nids realize the game's up, and they rise out of the grass and charge toward us, a wave of multi-limbed monstrosities intent on our destruction. I take one last look as they come streaming over the plain, blossoms of fire exploding in their midst, showing off their snarling faces and brief glimpses of hellfire before jumping down the steps, three at a time, to get back at my platoon. Right, men, I said. Stay steady. Follow my lead, stay tight. If you get separated, they'll pick you off, no problem. When you shoot, aim for the flesh. Your las guns will have your las guns will have about as much effect on their carapace as punching a Lehman Russ. Watch your ammo counters too, because tonight's going to be a long haul, and I don't want to cause those fragging bugs any reason to face them with my bare hands. One final thing. Don't get yourselves killed, because otherwise I'm going to have to put up with another fresh draft of no-hopers. If you let me go down, sure as hell, I'm going to make sure I come back and haunt you for the rest of your miserable lives, reminding you just what a bunch of fragging, slack-jawed sons of orcs you are. That gets a smile. Personally, I couldn't give a frag about all this pre-battle speech crap. But some of them need it. I can tell. Just like me, they're getting awfully nervous. I mean, they're a bunch of hard-nosed, thick-skinned meatheads for the most part. But even then, you've got nothing but air between your ears, and you can't get over the unreasoning horror that the Tyranids bring out in you. It's not just like they kill you. They devour you. They take everything you are, everything you ever going to be, and change it, pervert it into something else. It's a horrible thought. I don't mind telling you. The fire is still pretty steady from the top of the wall, so I guess we're holding out okay. I give myself the luxury of watching the Battle Sisters fight for a while, along the natives. It's a really bizarre scene, I can tell you. You have 1,000 or so of those dark-skinned warriors, hurling spears and firing bows, their skin glistening with sweat, their booming war chants echoing down from the wall. And then there's the Seratas. They're chanting too, their voices raised in constant prayer to the Emperor, a choir, all singing as one. I can't make out the words, but it reaches inside me, lifting my spirits. It's a song of defiance and devotion. And as they sing, they fire methodical bursts from their bolters, fusillade after fusillade, pouring into the darkness, every round sending a streak of light into the shadows from the internal propellant. Then I see a swathe of the natives, jumping in all directions, screaming like mad, clawing at their faces and chests. That'd be a death spitter then. Fire some sort of explosive bug that sprays acid all over the place. Burn right through near anything given enough time. And against the exposed flesh of the native irregulars, it's pretty lethal. Dragging my eyes away from the scene, trying to turn a deaf ear to their agonized screams, I watch what's happening around the gatehouse. There's hand-to-hand fighting going on now, and I pick out the colonel, a glowing power sword in one fist and a bolt pistol in the other. While the others are desperately hacking and slaying, he's just stepping to and fro, felling a foe with every blow or shot, as if the chaos going on around him wasn't really happening at all. I see the shape of a lictor rise up behind him, but he just turns on the spot, fills its face full of bullets, and then chops its legs from beneath it, with two swings of the power sword. Calm as you like, as if he were just taking a stroll in the morning airs. Damn, but he's so cold. It makes the Battle Sisters seem positively emotional. But the glance they reserve for scum like us would freeze worse than a night on Valhalla. Did something appears on the western gatehouse that almost makes me swallow my tongue in terror. Silhouetted against the rising moon is the figure of the Hive Tyrant. It's almost 3 times as tall as the men around it. 2 arms are molded into some kind of massive living gun, while two other end in a whip-like protrusion and a serrated bone sword. A thick tail lashes between its legs, tipped with a sting the size of your arm. Mandibles that can chew a man in two snap hungrily in its jaw, and its body is covered in chitinous armor and bony protrusions. It fires the venom cannon into the packed mass of the gatehouse, blasting apart guardsmen and Tyranids alike. Its head stretches back and lets loose a horrifying bellowing screech, which seems to roll along the wall like a wave, sending men staggering in fear, making them pause in their fight, so that they're cut down with ease by the termagants and warriors they're fighting. The Tyranid steps down from the parapet, its hoofed feet sending massive splinters of masonry flying as it stamps down with all its massive weight. Gazing around, it fixes its evil eyes on the colonel as he musters his men for a counterattack. They charge in, las bolts bouncing harmlessly off the monster's armored hide, their bayonets snapping against his chitinous plates. Then the bone sword sweeps down, and I see a spray of blood fountain into the air, as 4 men are cut down with that single blow. The whip lashes out, its barbs tearing across the chest of another guardsman, his ragged corpse flung from the wall to land in a limp heap in the courtyard. Surely even the colonel has met his match this time. He's chopping his way through a brood of warriors to get at the Hive Tyrant. There's a pause in the fighting, and he glances over the parapet to the ground outside. He stops for a moment and looks over to where we're positioned. With a wave of his arms, he signals us to attack. Here we go, last chancers, I cry out, and start heading for the wall. I've taken perhaps 5 steps when something seems wrong. I realize that I'm alone, and I stop and look around. They're just standing there, looking at the Hive Tyrant as it butchers another squad of men. What the frag is this? I howl. I grab Sergeant Phoenix by his lapels and push him towards the wall, but he turns around and snarls at me. This is madness! He shouts over the cries of slaughter on the wall. That's a freaking Hive Tyrant! It's gonna kill every one of us! We gotta get the hell out of here while we can. Deliverance is fallen, Kage. Face it. He calms down a little and fixes me with an intense stare. There's nothing more we can do. We've got to save ourselves. There's no fragging martyrs, Kage, and you know it. He's right. But then something else catches my eye over their heads. There's lights dropping down from the stars again, curved around from orbit towards Deliverance in a long arc. I glance back at the gatehouse and see the gates shuddering as some titanic beast tries to break them down. I make a decision. Look, I tell them, pointing at the pinpricks of light falling to the south. There ain't no escaping Deliverance, boys. That's more Mycetic spores falling down. We're going to be surrounded. There's no way we can get clear of the area before those things reach here. Crusoe from Let's Squad opens his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. There ain't no getting out of this one, lads. We're gonna have to die in deliverance. Now, I see it two ways. You can die running from the fight, like the thieves and cowards everyone thinks we are. Sure, you can do that. Just get over the wall and hide out. But it won't take long for them to find you. And when you're all alone out there in the night, cowering in the grass, trying not to. A crash from the gatehouse distracts me, and I turned around to have a look. The chimera behind the gates is rocking heavily on its tracks now. It's gonna go over any second, so I better make this quick. For frag's sake, we ain't got anything worth fighting for, except our pride. Right now, I don't give a frag about the natives, or the Emperor or the Colonel. But what I do care about is how I'm gonna die, and I ain't gonna be with my back turned on my knees. I'm gonna go down fighting like a man. If there's any men with me here, then you better come too. Otherwise, you boys can just go running off to cry, dying on your bellies like the scum that you are. I spit on the ground in front of them, and then start walking towards the gate. I'm taking a hell of a risk, because if they don't follow me, I'm going to be standing in front of the gate on my own. Well, whatever it is so big and nasty it'll batter its way through. 3 feet of plasteel gets through. Then I hear the thud of boots, and they're with me. So I guess the suckers fell for it. I look up and see the hive tyrant's gone from the gate tower, but I can still see the colonel slicing his way through that big power with that big power sword of his. Emperor knows how the frag he managed that one. Well, if I live to see the dawn, I might just find out. With a screech of tearing plasteel, the gates are torn apart, and the chimera gets shunted towards us. There's a sound like a tank ramming a building, and the personnel carrier is flung upwards, spinning through the air. It crashes down as its fuel goes up, a massive fireball that shoots 30 meters in the air. In the flames and smoke, I see a sight that will follow me to my grave. Long may it be before I get there. In the red glare comes this huge Tyranid creature, about 4 meters tall and just as wide. It's some kind of carnifex, but nothing I've ever seen before. It's got 4 massive side-like arms, but the bony excrusions at the top of its shoulders jut forward, rows of spikes thrust towards, like it's some sort of living battering ram. Nestled between its immense shoulders, its head a kind of fused with its chest, a large fang-ringed mouth opened in a permanent roar. Pieces of twisted metal hang from the spines as it stomps through the smoke and flames like some monstrous devil from the pits of hell. Without a pause, it shoulders aside the wreck of the chimera, and I'm horrified to see that some of the burning vehicle tears off along one of the creature's armored plates. The debris carries on burning, the flames crawling along the carnifex's carapace, but it just keeps advancing steadily, as if nothing had happened at all. Blow that bastard away, I shout, and everyone snaps out of the spell. Bryden steps up with a las cannon, a bolt of powerful energy enough to cripple a battle tank, scoring a wound across the carnifex's armored skull, making thick, dark blood dribble down the exoskeleton of its body. The heavy bolter in Franz's squad kicks in, explosive shells ripping across his legs as thick as tree trunks, and a shower of detonations. But it still comes on, the ground shaking as those massive feet thud down into the dirt. It pauses for a second, its beady eyes reflecting the flickering flames, and fixes us with a stare. Its arms arch back, spreading to bellow forth a roar that can probably be heard off-world. It breaks into a run, a gathering momentum. Lasgun fire, heavy bolter shots, and las cannon shots bounce off it as it limbers towards us. Once more, its mouth opens for another terrifying roar. But Breeden picks its moment precisely. Its aim guided by the Emperor, I'm sure. His aim guided by the Emperor, I'm sure. And the next las cannon bolt lands in its mouth, smashing its head to a pulp, scattering fragments of skull across the courtyard. For a moment, I think that even this isn't enough to stop it, as it comes rumbling on towards us. But then the rest of the body catches up with what's happening, and it collapses to the ground with dark, thick ichor oozing out of its gigantic puddle around the mammoth corpse. I breathed a sigh of relief, glad that those useless fraggers decided to follow me after all. Otherwise, I'd be little more than a smear along those claws by now. However, just as my heart rate drops to something below a million beats a minute, the rest of the Tyranids start to pour in through the opening. At its front is a brood of warriors, death spitters and devourers, firing as they advance. Men are going down all around me, and a stray spatter of acid splashes onto my arm. The pain is almost unbearable, and I stoop to grab a handful of dirt to rub the acid off. My right arm's almost numb, so I drop my las pistol, grab my chainsword in my left hand. The lead warriors go down from fire, from the las gun, and heavy bolters, but there's more and more of the things pouring through the gap now. I look around to see how the platoon's holding out, and I see there's only about a dozen of us left now. Franz catches my gaze, and I see his desperation turn into fierce pride in that single glance. As if a subconscious order is given, we all charge forward, throwing ourselves at the tide of beasts, sweeping into deliverance. My chainsword bites flesh, and I hear an inhuman shriek of pain. I'm not really looking at what's happening. I'm just chopping left and right, hacking blindly, knowing that I can't miss in the tight press of enemy creatures swirling around me. Then, a massive clawed paw, larger than that of a Cthulan cub bear's, comes out of the darkness, smashing me across the face. My head spins, and I only dimly feel a sharp blade cutting across my thigh. I feel something wet and sticky pouring down my legs, and I gaze down, numbly, seeing my blood spilling into the dirt. I try to take a step forward, but all my strength seems to have been sapped from me. I drop to my knees, feeling rough alien skin rasping against me, pushing past, leaving me for dead. Then a shadow descends, and I feel like I'm falling down a deep, dark hole. My ears pick up singing, and my mind ringing to the sound of angelic voices, singing the praises of the Emperor. So this is what it's like to die. There's an Emperor after all, and I shall receive my judgment, just like Nathaniel and the Colonel said. My thoughts are getting slow, and for the first time in 10 years of fighting, I feel proud. I didn't run this time. I stayed. I'm dying, but I went down dying. Surely that's got to count for something. Every good book should foreshadow what it will do. Foreshadowing is a very important device because it gets you used to the theme of the book without telling you exactly what the theme is, because once you pick up the pattern, then that's what the theme is all the theme in any book is a pattern repeated over and over again. And the theme here, of course, is redemption. But you don't find redemption in life, you find it in death. And that's, well, it's unfortunate, but that, you can be a coward and just die, or you can be a hero and die with honor. Well, not really a hero, but a good soldier, I guess. That's really the best way to test the man, is to see what he does in those final moments. Because if he breaks down and just cowers, then probably not a man, probably a coward. There's so many cowards nowadays. The thing about a coward is they can't really do anything. They can only complain. They don't have any skin in the game. What? Oh. I can hear voices, shouting orders being bellowed. So I guess I'm alive then. And I really was right about those falling lights. I try to open my eyes, but the left one seems closed up. I raise an arm, feeling so weak, and touch my temple. Instant pain tells me that there's a bruise the size of a small moon up there, and it's probably blood crusting up my eye. My right arm is swathed in bandages and won't move at all. Through my good eye, I see those troops running backwards and forwards, and I watch a line of 3 Lehman Russ battle tanks warming up, ready to go out of the gate. I guess I'm propped up against the redoubt. I can feel some rough stonework poking into my back. I turn my head slowly left and right, wary of dizziness and nausea, and I see that there's others like me, bandaged and bloody, all along the redoubt. The colonel walks past, and he notices that I'm awake. He strides up and stands in front of me, thankfully blocking out the bright light of the sun. I can't see his face, it's in the shadows, but he's looking down at me. "Still alive, then, Kage?" he demands. His voice is gruff as ever. "Afraid so, sir. Guess I can't kick the habit just yet." I try to manage a smile, but my face is just a mass of aching and pain. "I heard what happened," he says, dropping down on one knee so that I can see those icy eyes as they fix me with their stare. "Tell me one thing, Gage. You could have run out on me. You had the chance. And you could have done it before. What made you fight?" I fix him with my good eye, returning his gaze with a steady look of my own. "Well, sir, it's like this," I explain. "I saw the lights coming down, and I knew they weren't Imperial Guard transports. My static spores just come straight down, but they had a landing trajectory. So I knew that Deliverance was saved. Thing was, though, we had to hold out. Because if the Tyranids got in the compound, we'd all be dead. There's nowhere to run from those creatures." The colonel frowns at me. "So what did you tell your men? That there were more spores coming down? Rather than the relief force?" he asks. "You must know why, sir," I reply. "Because it seems so obvious to me. If I told them that help was on the way, they'd lose their little stomach that they had left. They'd think they could give up, get away from here. But like I said, there wasn't any escape from Deliverance, not a chance. So I did the only thing I could. I stripped them of that false hope, gave them nothing to live for, except life itself. You see, sir, when you ain't got frag all worth fighting for, you'll still fight to be alive. Give a man a chance to go back down, and he'll take it. But give him nothing, and he'll grab what he can with both hands and not let go for as long as he can. He'll fight to his last breath, just to take one more breath, just to feel his heart beat just one more time before he dies. If you stick a man in the middle of a fight and give him a gun, he'll fight like a cornered rat, because there's nothing else he can do. That's why the last chancers work, sir. It's exactly what you do to us all. We ain't got no choice but to fight and fight good, because if we don't, we're dead. None of us wants to fight. None of us wants to die. So we'll do all we can. Everything that's possible, including going on your damn suicide mission just to breathe one more time. It's why I fight. It's why they fight." He just grunts and then stands up. He turns to walk away, but I call after him. "There's another reason why I fight my damnedest, sir." He spins around and looks at me, an eyebrow raised in question. I ain't gonna give the fragging satisfaction of seeing me dead just yet." The chamber hummed and vibrated with energy that coursed along the thick cables snaking along the low ceiling. Somewhere in the distance could be heard the steady thump, thump, thump of heavy machinery in the operation. Glow globes were set at mere intervals around the metal walls on the square room, illuminating the scene with a fitful, jaundiced light. With a creak, the lock wheel on the door spun slowly. Thick metal bars to either side of the portal ground through their rusted brackets. The door swung open, and a figure stepped inside, swathed in a long black greatcoat, the tall collar obscuring his face. As he paced into the light, his thin face caught the yellow glow, giving him a sickly pallor. His dark eyes glanced over his shoulder before he took another step forward, easing the door closed behind him. Suddenly the man stopped. His eyes snapped to the artifact stored in the middle of the room. It resembled a coffin, stood on end, with a rat's nest of cables springing from it to fasten a hastily rigged connectors that pierced the cabling onto the ceiling. The glass front of the coffin lay in shards and splinters across the floor. Of what was contained within, there was no sign. Recovering from his initial shock, the man began to examine the sarcophagus, probing with an inexpert finger at the various dials set at its sides. He stepped back and stroked the fingers of a long hand, gloved in black velvet, through his short goatee beard, brow furrowed in concentration, his lips twisted in agitation. Emperor damned stasis chamber, he said to himself, looking around once more. I should have got it consecrated by a tech priest. As he walked around to the back of the coffin, his gaze was caught by a darker shadow in the top corner of the far wall. He peered closer and saw a ventilation duct. Its corroded grill had been twisted and torn, ripped to one side. Standing on tiptoe, he pulled himself up to look into the opening. The faint light from the room illuminated a meter or so of the narrow shaft that swiftly sloped upwards and out of sight. Dropping back towards the floor, he banged his fist against the thigh with a short, frustrated gesture. He pulled his glove from his right hand and reached into a deep pocket inside his coat, pulling out a device the size of a clenched fist. He stabbed the button on its surface. The light from the glow globes caught on a golden ring in his index finger, inscribed with the device of an eye, inset on a grinning skull. Raising the device to his lips, the man spoke. Third day of Estipoles. I returned to the stasis chamber, which appears to have malfunctioned. The specimen has escaped. I will start immediate investigations to recover or eliminate it. I pray to the Emperor that I can recapture the monster. This mistake could cost us dearly. What is the status of Operation Harvest? Operation Harvest is beginning second stage as scheduled. Operation Harvest. Operation Harvest. I read The Last Chancers quite a few times. And as you can see, even the cover is pretty battle damaged. It's about like explosions and war. Cool stuff. The guardsman's nose exploded with blood as my fist crashes between his eyes. Next, I hit him with a left to the chin, knocking him backwards a step. He ducks out of the next punch, spitting back blood from his cracked lips. My nose is filled with the smell of old sweat and fresh blood, and perspiration from the blazing sun trickles down on my face and throat. All around I can hear chanting and cheering. Fraggin' kink his fraggin' neck! I recognize Droid's voice. Break the son of an orc apart! Franks yells. The guardsmen from Chorek are cheering their man on too, their flushed faces looking dark in contrast to their white and gray camouflage jackets and leggings. He makes a lunge at me, his face swathed in blood, his dusty uniform covered in red stains. I easily sidestep, his bullish charge bringing my knee up hard into his abdomen and feeling some of the ribs crack under the blow. He's doubled up now, his face a mask of pain, but I'm not going to stop there. I grab the back of his head with both my hands and ram my knee up to his face, hearing the snap of his cheek or jaw fracturing. He collapses sideways just as he falls. The toe cap of my standard issue boot connects with his chin. hurling his head backward into the hard soil. I'm about to lay into him again when I realize everything's gone dead quiet. I look up to see what the hell's happening, panting hard. Pushing through the Chorek ranks as a massively muscled man, and I spot the insignia of a master sergeant on the blue sleeve of his tunic. He's got the black pelt of some shaggy creature tied as a cloak over his left shoulder, and his eyes are fixed with me on murderous intent. In his hand is a 60-centimeter metal parade baton. Red jewels cluster around one end, and he steps up to me and smashes the point of it into my guts, knocking the wind out of me and forcing me to my knees. Penal Legion scum! The Choruk Master Sergeant barks. I'll show you what they should have done to you. He pulls his arm back for a good swing at me, but then stops in mid-strike. Just try it, I think to myself. I've killed harder men and creatures than you. I'm still fired up from the fight and ready to pounce on this jumped up bully of an officer. I'll give him the same treatment I've just dealt to his man. He glances over to my head, and a shadow falls over me. A prickly sensation starts at the back of my neck and turns into a slight shiver down my spine. I turn to look over the shoulder, still clutching my aching guts, and see that he's there, the Colonel, Colonel Schaefer, commanding officer of the 13th Penal Legion, known by those unlucky enough to be counted amongst its number as the Last Chancers. The swollen dusk sun behind him, the sun always seemed to be behind him, and he's always in shadow or silhouette when you first see him, like it's a talent he's got. All I can see are the icy glitterings of his sharp blue eyes, looking at the Master Sergeant, not me. I'm glad of that, because his face is set like stone, a sure sign that he's in a bad mood. That will be all, Master Sergeant, the Colonel says calmly, just standing there with his left hand resting on the hilt of his power sword. That man needs disciplining, replies the Chorek, arm still raised for the blow. I still think this guy is stupid enough to try it as well, and secretly hope that he will, just to see what Schaefer does to him. Disperse your troopers from the landing field, the Colonel tells the Master Sergeant, and mine will soon be out of your way. The Chorek officer looks like he's going to argue some more, but then he makes the mistake of meeting the Colonel's gaze, and I smirk when I see him flinch under the cold stare. Everyone sees something different in those blue eyes, and it's always something painful and unpleasant that they're reminded of. The Colonel doesn't move or say anything while the Master Sergeant herds his men away, pushing them with the baton when they turn to look back. He details two of them to drag away the trooper I knocked out, and casts one murderous glance back at me. I know his kind, an unmistakable bully, and the Choreks are going to suffer for this humiliation when they reach their camp. On your feet, Kage, snaps the Colonel, not moving a muscle. I struggle up, wincing as soreness flashes across my stomach from the Master Sergeant's blow. I don't meet the Colonel's gaze, but already I'm tensing, expecting the sharp edge of his tongue. Explain yourself, Lieutenant, he says quietly, folding his arms like a cross tutor. That Chorek scum said we should have all died on deliverance, sir, I told him. So we didn't deserve to live. Well, sir, I just been on burial detail for nearly 150 last chancers, and I lost my temper. You think that gutter scum like you deserve to live? The Colonel asked quietly. I know that we fought as hard as anybody. Maybe even harder, I tell him. Looking straight at him for the first time, the Colonel seems to think for a moment before nodding sharply. Good, he says, and I can't stop my jaw from dropping in surprise. Get these men into the shuttle. Without any more fighting. Lieutenant Kage, the Colonel orders, turning on his heel and marching off back towards the settlement of Deliverance. I cast an astonished look at the other last chancers around me. The glance met with dotted brows and shrugs. I composed myself for a moment, trying not to work out what the hell that was all about. I've learned it's best not to try to fathom the colonel sometimes. It'll just tie your head nuts. Well, you useless bunch of fragging lowlifes, I snap at the remnants of my platoon. You heard the colonel. Get your sorry hides onto the shuttle at the double. As I jog towards the blocky shape of our shuttle, France falls in on my left. I try to ignore the big sergeant, still annoyed with him from a couple days ago, when he could have got me deep in trouble with the colonel. Kage, he begins, glancing down across his broad shoulder at me. Haven't had a chance to talk to you since before the Tyranids attacked. You mean since before you tried to lead the platoon into the jungles on some stupid escape attempt? I snapped back, my voice purposefully harsh. He wasn't going to get off easily, even if I did consider him something of a friend. A friendship he'd pushed to the limits by trying to incite a rebellion around me. Can't blame me, Kage, he says, with a slight whine to his deep voice that irritates me. Should have all died back then. You know it. I'm still alive, and I know if I'd let you take off, I wouldn't be, I reply, not bothering to look at him. The colonel would have killed me for letting you go, even before the Nids had a chance. Yeah, I know, Franks tells me apologetically. Look, I say, finally meeting his eyes, I can't blame you for wanting out. Emperor knows it's what we all want. But you've got to be smarter about it. Pick your time better, and not one that's going to leave me implicated. I understand, Kage. Franks nods before being silent. One of the shuttle crewmen, looking hot and bothered in his crisp blue and white Navy uniform, is counting us off as we head up the loading ramp, giving us sullen looks, as if he wishes he could just leave us here. It's hot inside the shuttle, which was slowly baking in the harsh sun, until the air inside feels like a kiln. I see the others settling into places along the tree benches, securing themselves with thick restraint belts that hung from beams that stretch as the head height along the shuttle chamber's 10-meter length. I find a place and strap myself into the restraining harness. France takes the place next to me. How's Cronin? He asks, fumbling with the metal buckle as he pulls the leather straps tighter across his barrel chest. I haven't seen him. He went on the first shuttle run, I tell him, checking around to see that everybody else is secured. Seeing that the survivors of my platoon are sitting as tight as the battle sitter's affections, I give the signal to the naval rating, waiting at the end of the seating bay. He disappears to the bulkhead, and the red takeoff lights flash 3 times in warning. I haven't got the full story on Cronin yet, I say to Franks, pushing my back against the hard metal of the bench to settle myself. Franks is about to reply when the rumble of thrusters reverberates through the fuselage of the shuttle. The rumbling increases in volume, and I feel myself being pushed further into the bench by the shuttle's takeoff. The whole craft starts to shake violently as it gathers momentum, soaring upwards into the sky above Deliverance. My booted feet judder against the mesh decking of the shuttle, and my backside slides slightly across the metal bench. My stomach is still painful, and I feel slightly sick as the shuttle breaks over sharply to take its new course. The 12-centimeter slash to my right thigh begins to throb painfully as more blood is forced into my legs by the acceleration. I grit my teeth and ignore the pains. Through a viewport opposite, I can see the ground dropping away, the seemingly haphazard scattering of shuttles and dropships, sitting a kilometer beyond the walls of Deliverance. The settlement itself is receding quickly until I could only dimly make out the line of the curtain wall and a block of the central keep. Then we're onto the clouds and everything turns white. As we break into the atmosphere, the engines turn to dull whine, and a scattering of stars replaces the blue of the sky outside the viewport. Franks leans over. They say Cronin is touched, he says, tapping the side of his skull to emphasize the point. It's bloody strange, I'll give you that, I reply. Something happened to him back when he was in the chapel. Chapel? Franks asks, scratching his head vigorously through a thick bush of brown curls. What did you hear? I ask, curious to find out what rumors had started flying around. Only a day after the battle, after the Tyranids, gossip is a good way of finding engaging morale, as well as the reactions to a recent battle. Of course, we're never happy being stuck in a penal unit until we die, but sometimes some of the men are more depressed than usual. The fight against the alien Tyranids at the missionary station was horrific. Combating monsters like them always is. I wanted to know what the men were focusing their thoughts on. Nothing really, Frank says, trying unsuccessfully to shrug in tight confines of the safety harness. People are saying that he went over the edge. The way I heard it, he and the rest of the second platoon had fallen back to the chapel, I told him. There were Nids rushing about everywhere, coming over the east wall. Some of them were the big warriors, smashing at the doors of the shrine with their claws, battering their way in. They crashed through the windows and got inside. There was nowhere to run. Those alien bastards just started hacking and chopping and everything inside. They lost the whole platoon except for Cronin. They must have left him for dead, since the colonel found him under a pile of bodies. That's a sure way to crack, Frank says sagely, his half smile showing on bulbous lips. Anyway, I continue, Cronin is cracked, like you say, keeps talking all this gibber, constantly jabbering away about something that no one could work out. I've seen that kind of thing before, says Pohl, who's been listening from the side of Frank's. His narrow, chiseled face has a way of knowing about it, like he was a sage dispensing the wisdom of the ancients or something. I had a sergeant once, whose leg was blown off by a mine on Gallus too. He kept repeating his brother's name after minute, day after day. He slit his own throat with a med scalpel in the end. There's a moment of silence as everybody considers this. I carry on with the story to distract them from thoughts of self-murder. Yeah, that's pretty grim, I tell them. But Cronin's case just gets weirder. Turns out, he's not mumbling any old thing. Oh no, he's quoting scripture, right? Nathaniel, the preacher back in Deliverance, overhears him saying out lines from the litanies of faith. Stuff like, and the beast from the abyss rose with its multitudes and laid out low the servants of the emperor with its clawed feet and hands. Things like that. Fragged if I ever seen Cronin with a damned prayer book. Not in 2 fragging years of fighting under the son of an orc, Jordan announces, from the bench down in the middle of the shuttle, looking around. Everybody's listening now, and we can be heard over the damned noise of the engines. 40 pairs of eyes look towards me in anticipation of the next twist in the tale. Exactly, I declare with an empathetic nod, beginning to play to the audience a little bit. I'm enjoying having a new tale to tell for a change, and it keeps them from falling out with each other, which usually what happens when we wind down from a mission. Nathaniel sits down with him for a couple hours while we bury the dead, I continue, passing my gaze over those that can see me. I heard him explaining his view on things, the colonel seethes about the colonel. Seems Cronin had a visitation from the emperor himself while he lay half dead in the chapel. Says he has been given divine knowledge. Of course, he doesn't actually say this. He's just quoting appropriate lines from the litanies like, and the emperor appeared with a shimmering halo and spake upon his people on Galathamor. And like you say, how in the 7 hells does he know any of this stuff? There is nothing mystical about that, answers Gappo, sitting on his own towards the rear of the shuttle. Nearly everybody seems to give an internal groan, except a couple of the guys who are looking towards this new development in the entertainment. Myself, I've come to like Gappo. He's not as much of a meathead as the others. Oh, wise preacher, Paul says with a sarcastic sneer, please enlighten us with your bountiful wisdom. Don't call me preacher, Gabo snarls with a scowl, creasing his flat middle aged features. You know I left that falsehood behind. Whatever you say, Gappo, Paul tells him with a disdainful look. It's really quite simple, really, Gappo begins to explain, patiently ignoring Paul now. You've all been to the ecclesiarchal services, hundreds, even thousands of them. Whether you remember them or not, you've probably heard of all the litanies of faith and every line from the Book of Saints twice over. Cronin's trauma has affected his mind, so that he can remember those writings and nothing else. It's the only way he's got left to communicate. There are a few nods, and I can see the sense of it. People's heads are half fragged up anyway, in my experience, so it doesn't take much to jog it loose, from what I've seen. Emperor alone knows how many times I felt myself teetering on the edge of the insanity chasm. Luckily, I'm as tough as Croxhide, and it hasn't affected me yet. Not so as everyone's told me, in any case. Well, I guess that makes more sense than the Emperor filling him with his divine spirit, says Mallory, a balding, scrawny malingerer sitting next to Poe. After all, why don't they think the Emperor's best pleased with our Lieutenant Cronin? Specifically considering the fact that Cronin's in the last chances for looting and burning down a shrine. Of course it makes sense, Gappo says, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. There might not be an emperor at all. You shut your fracking mouth, Gappo Effluenzo, Paul spits, making the sign of the protective eagle over his chest with his right hand. I may have murdered women and children, and I know I'm a lowlife piece of orc crap, but I still think I shouldn't have to share the same room with a fracking heretic. Paul starts to fumble at his straps, having trouble because his left arm ends with a hook instead of an arm. I can see things might be getting out of hand. That's enough, I bark. You all know the score. It doesn't matter what you did to wind up as one of the Colonel's doomed men. We're all last chancers now. Now shut the frag up until we're back on the transport. There were a few grumbles, but nobody says anything out loud. More than one of them here had a cracked skull or a broken nose for answering me back. But I'm not a bully, you understand. I just have a short temper and don't like it when my men start getting too disrespectful. Seeing that everybody is calming down, I close my eyes and try to get sleep. It'll be another 2 hours before we dock. Oh.